Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today's guest is someone who provides a very clear pathway to growth and sustainability. She actually tells a story. That's right, you heard me right. She, as in Shiro, starts the journey of her nonprofit, of this nonprofit, doing something nobody ever thinks of, a feasibility study. Is there a market out there that cares about what I'm thinking about? And if so, how are they thinking we should build this organization? Who does that? Margari did that. And she's going to tell you much more than that right now on this show. Margari Hill, founder, MuslimARC. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Sister Margari Hill, founder of MuslimARC. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, wow. Last time we connected a few years back, and I was so happy to meet you because, I'll be honest with you, like I study the sector and there's very few, Shiro executive directors and founders out there. And today I really, want you to think about our audience, which are Shiros and heroes who are thinking about solving a problem in the world. And they're running into challenges. Tell us, as you were thinking about MuslimARC, before MuslimARC existed, what was Margari thinking, seeing? What inspired her? How did she get started?
Yeah, well, this has been, I've had a lifetime journey in education. So I really value education, especially for those who may not have access. Public intellectuals I've learned from lay people, and there's always these smart conversations happening. And what I found was that anti-racism was something that was only really happening whether you're working in a social change institution or in higher education, but it wasn't really accessible for lay people. And especially for those who were busy like me at the time, I had a toddler. And there's always this desire to learn and to create community. And so when I had always been blogging too. So from 2007 to 2014, I was blogging, but I knew that there was an importance to expand the conversation. And that was a need to create conversations on social media and to bring people together. So that was that is what was on my mind. But also there was this new model. It was so exciting for me at the time, which was I had some training when I was teaching at a community college, which was online learning. And the thing that was super exciting for me were these massive online open courses that you saw at Harvard, that, Coursera. And I thought that model was important for Muslim communities, and bringing together the anti-racism with massive online open courses was something that I started to develop in my Coursera. Like I was going through the certificate program that I wanted to bring to our communities.
Amazing. So here you are, you're in this education space, you're teaching at a college or university. At the same time, you realize there's this gap that, folks don't know how to deal with hate, Muslim hate. And so then what happens next? At what point do you start organizing? Do you go just right to registering your nonprofit? What happens? How do you take it from I'm working on this to building an organization?
Yeah, initially in 2013, so fall 2013, I was developing the course and I got an email from a lawyer, a newly minted lawyer, Namira Islam, who was born and raised in Detroit. And she said that there's this problem of anti-Black racism in Muslim communities. And I was like, oh my gosh, like one, you're a lawyer and you're a graphic designer. And I love graphic design. I love online. I love websites. But I also have this idea of creating courses where we could build leaders in our community who could go back to their communities to address the racism within Muslim communities, because we're all facing Islamophobia, but when we're divided, we're so much weaker. And so from there, we started an initiative. We didn't think we were going to start an organization initially, but through the initiatives, during Black History Month. So we planned it out around December. And in February, when we launched a series of hashtag conversations, the first one was being Black and Muslim. So we had some prompts and we launched it on Twitter. And when that trended for 24 hours of like triumph, pride, where Black Muslims were sharing why they loved being Black and Muslim, but there was also that communal heartbreak. And as that trended, we saw, wait, this is the beginning of a needs assessment. And so from a series of conversations, talking with stakeholders, one of our kind of like steering members said, we need to do a needs assessment to see if this is something we should do. So we did launch a needs assessment study during that year, and we had 400 respondents. We also had scores of one-to-one conversations. And in doing the needs assessment, that's when we learned from the data, from all the respondents, from the conversations, that this was a gap. We identified that there was a need. And when we asked, like, what should we do? Our community members said, we need to have education, because we could have done a number of things for anti-racism, right? But learning from the community was important, and doing that needs assessment study was critical in developing our strategy for countering not only intra-Muslim racism, but also providing a framework for Muslims to talk about what we were experiencing from a racial justice perspective, and also to be involved.
I'm sorry I had to cut you off. I have to stop you, and here's why. You are the first person on the show that said you did a needs assessment before you launched your nonprofit. I got to say that again. You're the first person that has said we did a proper best practice, industry best practice needs assessment before we organized our strategy and organized and made our organizations. Very different, Margie. That's very different. The traditional pathway in the Muslim community is, I have an idea and I go to my friend, I go to my spouse, I go to my neighbor, I go to people in the masjid, and I'm like, hey, this is what we're doing, join in. And then we just start doing it. And we have no idea who's going to support it. We don't have any idea in how we're going to do it really, really well in the way the community wants it done. But here you are, Marjorie, and you said the attorney, Namira. So here's Marjorie and Namira. They're like, wait a second, we see a problem here, fard kifaya, but we're not sure. Let's see what the community thinks about this problem and how they think we should solve it. And did a needs assessment. Amazing. Sorry, I interrupted you. Please continue.
That's so important. And thank you for highlighting that. One of my biggest criticisms, right? I mean, I've been involved in the Muslim community for 33 years from the time I became Muslim and working in the MSA. And so when we're in the MSA, it's not like, oh, we're going to start another MSA, but we're going to work with the institutions and learn. And so what we found was that it was important for us to get the institutional memory, but not to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
We don't have to reinvent the wheel. And you can, if an organization is doing okay work and maybe they need to be strengthened, right? Maybe they need your energy and your insight. You don't have to start another one to address the need. And that is something that does tap into our resources. And it doesn't mean that we all have to have like McDonald's and that's the only thing that we eat, but maybe it's identifying like, well, this organization approaches it this way, right? We have organizations that do advocacy work, right? And so maybe our organization fulfills a different need and supports the advocacy through education. So we really tried to hone in on what was our particular niche, as opposed to just replicating something and being kind of new to the field, not knowing how we were going to contribute.
I love it. And the other thing that and for our listeners out there, I am in, the fully supportive of Sister Marjorie Hill's, playbook. Her playbook is the right playbook. You do a needs assessment, and by the way, I want to go back one more time. There might be people right now, Marjorie, who are saying needs assessment. What is that? Maybe they're sitting on ChatGPT or Google right now saying, what's a needs assessment? Can you just take a minute and maybe what's the playbook for a needs assessment for somebody who's thinking about a problem right now?
Well, one, it's like really, and you could go through the different process of doing your research, like identifying, okay, here is this problem, researching what are other types of organizations that address that need, right? Interviewing community, creating a survey, right, of stakeholders who are directly impacted by the issue, people who work on that particular issue. So creating a survey, and you could actually use ChatGPT, Google. There's also, if you go to any of the nonprofit like resources, they actually give you tips on how to do a needs assessment. When we did ours, we didn't have any funding. And I remember a social scientist said, like, they were like, oh, this study is so problematic. Don't, if you ever do this again, contact me, and so it wasn't perfect. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any funding, but just surveying people. And it was the first of its kind. It was actually the first quantified study to look at intra-Muslim ethnic relations.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know we were doing anything historic, but I was just following that mandate where somebody said it was like the steering member and another advisor had said, like, look, you got to like assess whether this is something that is a problem.
Yeah.
And, so just look, there's tons of resources for how to do a needs assessment. Even if you're doing a business, do that in your business plan and really think about your nonprofit. Like a lot of times we think we focus on the mission, but we don't fully understand how is it going to run also?
Yeah.
Like, how are we going to get this mission done and how can we make it sustainable? So while we had the needs assessment part down, we didn't quite have a strategic plan. We didn't do that work. And that came a little bit later in 2017.
What'd that look like? How did you get there then? So you've got the needs assessment. The needs assessment basically informed, okay, yeah, move forward, organize. But then you just said that in 2017, you got to a strategic plan. What'd that look like?
Yeah, well, around 2016, I started going to workshops to develop my leadership capacity. There's tons of resources free usually within your city. Also, there's like nonprofit resources. And so I started going through workshops for strategic planning. And that was like creating certain models to assess like what do we have going? Because by this time, we were all the way in the work. We did workshops. We developed a curriculum by 2016. We were at ISNA. We were doing things at Islamic schools. We were really busy and we had lots of programming. And during that time of developing a strategic plan, and it was like kind of like the self-help, you make your own, you do the assessment of where you're at as an organization. And we had already been incorporated by 2015 as a nonprofit. And that's also like its own process of incorporating as a nonprofit and getting the legal paperwork and everything down, having your officers, building out your team and applying. And through that, after we did the self-help, I went to another workshop for strategic planning. And then I got our co-founder to come out and I was like, look, we got to do this strategic plan. And we did the workshop together and to consider it a living document. So that was the initial start. But then one of our funders, like they said, look, we'll fund you, but what we want you to do is to focus this and bring in a consultant to do your strategic plan. So they developed a series of interviews. We had retreats to think about our mission, our theory of change, our structures to look at what we did in the past. So it was very iterative. Every year we were doing something to develop and build the organization. And we learned as we went along, there was a lot of mistakes that were made and continue to be made. But when you're thinking strategically and creating a roadmap for how you're going to get from your starting point to where you want to be, that was also very important.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. What I'm hearing you say, one thing that really stood out was you focused on your own leadership capacity
Mm-hmm.
and sort of, hey, needs assessment, create the organization, then build leadership capacity, not necessarily mission capacity just yet, but leadership capacity. And then
Mm-hmm.
from leadership capacity, then you need your North Star, which was strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And you even went out, got outside help, and continue to improve that process. Tell me about, you know, as you think about your organization today, and where it is today, what tips and advice, this is the last question I got for you today, and I'm definitely going to need you back out and we can talk more about the funding aspect and the program aspect and how you're taking on hate. What's advice? What's some advice you would share with our audience who are on that journey, who are thinking about starting something or maybe even giving up because it's so hard?
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be lots and lots of challenges. When you're starting a nonprofit, you're essentially an entrepreneur, and it's like you have to really understand your purpose, dig into that purpose, and you have to build your own capacity, right? You have to build your own capacity for um, guiding, like trying to get a team of people towards a shared mission. Because, like, as a leader, you can't do it all.
Yeah.
So, how do you build out a team? How do you do the kind of alignment? And so, for me, some of the strongest training that I got was in emotional state management, because I didn't have that before. Like, I mean, I'm a very sensitive person, highly sensitive, and you're going to get a lot of criticism. You're going to get a lot of people kind of questioning. But, when you're able to like really ground yourself in purpose and
Mm,
really purify your intention, right? Like, it's a lot of times when you're an executive director, you're in leadership or management, it could feel very thankless. Or even when there are the thanks, we have that negative bias where we're only going to focus on the criticism. And we have to take that criticism as something that's important data.
mm.
How people experience you is their truth. And we have to like really try to just be constantly improving, and also, recognize our own experiences and bring that together, and to constantly work on improvement, on balance, and really be grateful towards for the people who challenge us, who make the work hard, because at the end of the day, like, that's what's going to build our resilience.
Mashallah. Marjorie, thank you so much for sharing your story, MuslimARC's startup story. Thank you for highlighting the needs assessment and the strategic plan. And then thank you for telling us that we've got to build our own emotional. What was your words? You just called it. You said emotional. You need to build your
Emotional state
emo-
management. Yeah,
emotional state management. That's something I got to
I
go work
learned
on.
that the hard way. There was a lot of like tensions. I just remember where I was before and then now, like how you deal with conflict resolution is so important.
So important, mashallah. Thank you so much, Marjorie. Thank you for being on the show. We'll get you back out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam.